Welcome back to our channel. I want to thank you for watching. If this is your first time, I appreciate your time. In this episode, I will be diving deep into what the United States of America can learn from France's mistakes in the continent of Africa. I'm gonna be covering three very important things in this episode. The first will be the reason why France is moving out and why Russia is moving in. The second thing I'm going to be looking here is Africa exchanging one evil for another? I will close this episode in analyzing the reason why the United States should not take the exit of France as a joke. The US should learn from France's lesson in the continent of Africa. So without any more delay, let's just dive straight into it. In recent years, France has suffered geopolitical setbacks in Africa. Tension between Burkina Faso and Mali over French counter-terrorism operation led Paris to withdraw its troops from both of those countries. Russia is exploiting France's failure to defeat terrorist groups in Africa, as well as the feeling amongst many Africans that Paris exerts undue influence over its former colonies. The United States of America should learn from France's mistakes and strive to build partnerships in Africa based on mutual respect rather than focus too directly on competing with Russia or China. Moving forward, if you consider the aspect regards to Russia moving in and France moving out, on January 23rd, 2023, the military junta in Burkina Faso confirmed its decision to end the accord that allowed France's troops to fight terrorist groups in the country. That decision came a few weeks after the junta requested the departure of the French ambassador. Burkina Faso's junta, similar to their counterparts in Mali, aimed to drastically diminish France's influence in the country. One consequence of the deterioration of the France's relationship with its former colonies is the growing presence of the Russian Wagner Group in Francophone Africa. Two main factors explain the increased approval of Russia and the Wagner groups in Africa: the failure of a rapid eradication of the violent extremist groups and the desire of a new generation of African leaders to diversify their international partners. The latter appears to be mainly motivated by France's leaders' arrogant attitude towards Africans and the double standards many African countries accuse France of applying in the way it approached international affairs. For example, France supported non-democratic dynastic successions in countries such as Chad and Gabon, but cited democratic principles in calling for sanctions against the Guinea and also Malian juntas. Moving ahead, the lack of results in the fight against terrorism, even with the presence of French troops, is one of the factors that led to the military coup in Mali and Burkina Faso. The junta criticized the approaches of their respective governments to the war against terrorism. Local armies, military assistance from France and other Western countries, and the United Nations forces have been unable to neutralize the terrorist groups. Moreover, countries such as Mali have accused France of providing intelligence and weapons to armed groups operating on Malian territory, an accusation that has not been substantiated at all. France signed military agreements with many French-speaking African countries after independence that have borne little fruit. Those countries' armies are poorly trained and ill-equipped and must rely on France for almost everything. To many Africans, it is France's national interest to keep countries dependent on it. According to Abdoulaye Diop, Mali's Minister for Foreign Affairs, who actually said the difficulty we had with France was that it was not a sincere partnership that allowed Mali to evolve to ensure its security. He went ahead on saying it was a scheme of dependency. Moving forward, if you look at different aspects, considering that is Africa exchanging one evil for another, if you look at those particular activities happening within the region in Africa, the solution to the security problem for the Central African Republic and Mali seem to be turning to Russia and also the Wagner Group as partners to effectively train their military forces, and most importantly, to provide military equipment they need to fight extremists. Leaders of those countries consider the Wagner Group control over gold mines in exchange for their military support, not different than previous French practices in those different countries in the continent of Africa. France, through commercial entities, still controls significant mines and oil fields on the continent of Africa. The French company Orano operated a uranium mine in Niger that provided nearly 25% of the European Union's uranium supplies in recent years. However, investment in the development of the community around the mining site is almost non-existent, and people are exposed to levels of radiations above the limit internationally recommended. Russia propaganda in Africa is sophisticated and potentially dangerous. However, in Francophone Africa, the Russian merely takes advantage of a situation created by France's action. More than 60 years after its former colonies gained independence, France seemed bent on maintaining them in state of dependency. The use of the CFA currency franc by its former colonies and its support to dictators on the continent remain tools France uses to advance its commercial and geopolitical interest in the region. Looking ahead, the argument that France's military decline in Africa is a result of Russia's propaganda and Chinese influence in Africa as well fails to acknowledge France's action vis-à-vis its former colonies. Paris' decline and Russia's simultaneous rise in Africa are rooted in the perceived disdain that France leaders have shown for Africans' concern, and also their unwillingness to create a shared determination regards to partnership, determined and also clear-sighted partnership with former colony. So, to many Francophone African leaders, Russia is left as the only reliable foreign military partner to help them deal with extremists in the region. If you look at other aspects, considering that the United States of America should not take the exit of France lightly, that it should take France's experience to be a huge lesson, African leaders believe their continent is increasingly important in the greater power competition between China, Russia, Europe, and also the United States of America. African countries are open to new relationships based on partnership that also takes their needs and also includes into account not patronizing relationship with countries seeking to impose their ways of doing things. Africans want relationship of mutual respect and shared strategic goals, and the rights to also choose their allies and destinies. Moving ahead, as we draw down this episode, as the Biden administration sends a cascade of high-level officials to Africa, including Vice President Kamala Harris, First Lady Joe Biden, and the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, some African analysts doubt the sincerity of its engagement with the continent. They argue that the United States is more driven by fears of losing influence and leverage in a changing global order, where African countries are increasingly asserting their autonomy and diversifying their partnership. If you look at different aspects with regards to the challenges and how Africa is presenting itself in the global community at the moment, Fels Winsar, according to a Senegalese economist and philosopher who writes that Africa has no catching up to do. It must no longer run on tracks laid down by others, but rather walk firmly on its own chosen path. The United States of America should take note of this sentiment and adopt strategic policies that make it a reliable partner for Africa, not a patron. The recent United States of American Leadership Summit set the tone for a reset in the relationship, but the United States needs to bring forth actions instead of just words. Washington should not engage with the continent of Africa only to counter Russia or the Chinese presence and influence in the region. Instead, the United States should work to bring generations of Africans and Americans as well together to learn from each other and to work together in a mutually respectful way to face their century of global challenges in pursuit of a development and also prosperity for all. Looking at different aspects, as Africa began to amass itself, as the continent began to build itself and realizing its geopolitical importance in the world, we all are looking on how African countries will be choosing and picking their particular partnership and also engaging different countries with regards to geopolitical events in the region. We want to thank you for watching The Explorer. Hopefully we've informed you regards to what the Americans can learn from France's mistakes in Africa. Let us know if you are from one of those countries in Africa that France is having an influence, and if Russia's geopolitical presence is affecting your nation. We would like to hear from you in the comment section. If you are new to this channel, we will encourage you to check some of our informative video on this YouTube channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
We've just attended the African Union Assembly Heads of State meeting, which has in many ways gone well. We as South Africa had been appointed as the chairperson of the Peace and Security Council.